News and Swahili Online TV. We are live again with Kamau Chege. Kamau Chege, welcome to our show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And I know you have traveled thousands of miles away from where again? Where you from here? Where do you live here in the United States? Let's start from there.
Yeah, I traveled from Seattle to uh, Irmo, South Carolina,
Uh-huh.
to be with family,
Uh-huh.
and I've lived in different parts of the states. Um, First immigrated from Kenya, then lived in this place where we're shooting, where we're doing this live stream, and then uh, St. Louis, Missouri, Charlotte, North Carolina, before going to Washington State in the Pacific Northwest.
Wow. So, how's the temperature out there? Because you say you're from Washington State,
Yeah,
and you're here to visit your who again?
just here to visit family,
Mhm.
and it's hot, but even by uh, the normal standards of South Carolina, there's a whole heat wave that's been going through
Mhm.
the southern U.S. and a really prolonged heat wave
Mhm.
that's starting to get really dangerous because of the humidity.
Mhm.
And so, that's some places have gotten warnings about not exercising because if your body gets too hot
Mhm.
and the humidity is really high outside, it can be pretty dangerous.
So, we're here in Columbia, South Carolina. First, let me say welcome to our show, and I know that the temperature out there it's not very friendly. It's really hot. The advisor or advice just came out that I need to stay in the house and stop exercising out there. But let's move forward with the conversations. You work with the Washington Community Alliance. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And you're executive director. So, what exactly your role with respect to the organizations that you're leading? Welcome, Mr. Kamau.
Yeah, my role at the organization is to make sure that we're able to continue our mission and our work. We are a membership organization made up of community groups and other organizations, primarily in Black and Brown communities, immigrant organizations, Asian American organizations, African American organizations, African immigrant organizations, all coming together because they've seen that they have common issues
Mhm.
in their communities.
Mhm.
And one of them is the lack of investments in those communities,
Mhm.
the widening gap between the top and the bottom in terms of income inequality and wealth inequality. So those are some of our top issues. And they are also part of communities that have not been able to
Mhm.
have their voices heard in our democracy for a whole lot of reasons. And so that's kind of the work I lead on a day to day.
Wow, it looks like it's appear that you carry a huge responsibility, particularly to some of these issues that they would call it people of color,
Mm-hmm.
minority. I
Mm-hmm.
prefer to call it minority, African American,
Mm-hmm.
Latino, and non-Latinos. Some of these issues that they have been very vocal for the past, I can say, over 12 to 15 years. DACA.
Mm-hmm.
You have mentioned before our conversation or this interview about you have tremendously put a lot of effort with respect to DACA. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Welcome, Mr. Cheng.
Yeah, one of the big problems in the US is we've not had immigration reform since the 80s. And so there are a lot of people that haven't been able to have a path to
Mhm.
citizenship. And that's sort of the work I got started in after high school, organizing for immigrant rights.
Mhm.
Um, and one small victory that we've had is an Obama era program called DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals,
Mhm.
that was created by immigrant youth organizations and young immigrants organizing, protesting, and asking for access to a work permit and protection from deportation that could be renewed. And so now there's that program that's been able to allow people to renew their work permits every 2 years. I have one. And during the Trump administration, there was an effort to eliminate that program as sort of the Trump administration and the whole Republican Party has become very anti-immigrant and centralized that issue for themselves. And so myself and a couple dozen other um, DACA recipients intervened in a lawsuit to protect the program. And part of why DACA continues today is that case has been working its way through the courts, and we expect eventually it'll reach the Supreme Court sometime maybe next year.
Okay, that's very good. Just can you just elaborate a little bit about the case itself? It's at the state level or it's at the federal level?
Yeah, it's a federal level case. It's these very right wing authoritarian attorney generals, the Attorney General of Texas, who has a whole bunch of scandals, and others, um, trying to get rid of the program, trying to claim that because we are able to work, then that means state resources are going to us. And doesn't make a lot of sense because, people also, everyone pays taxes regardless of your immigration status. And so that's how the lawsuit came to be. I think the larger picture has always been that there should be a path to citizenship, and that's what most people think there should be. If you don't have status, if your status lapsed, there should be some process for you to um, correct that and have a path to citizenship. And because of the way our one particular party, the Republicans, have really turned immigrants into a central scapegoat and tried to use that for their own political advantage, we haven't had those larger reforms. One of the things that my organization has been working on is state-based solutions. So, there could be lawsuits to protect what we have, but to make new gains, it's best to work at the local and state level where you have more access to those governments. Yeah, and they're more responsive, and you can organize a lot more. If 100 people show up to the National Mall and Capitol, it's not making the news. But if 100 people show up to a city council meeting or a state legislative hearing, then it is really important. And so the main thing that we've been able to push for was pandemic checks, similar to the stimulus checks that most folks got, but including immigrants and undocumented immigrants in particular, because they were some of the people most likely to be in jobs endangered by the COVID-19 virus, working, in agriculture or in healthcare or in frontline services, restaurants. And then the second thing that we've been working on is really important, which is expanding unemployment insurance to include people who are working but don't have documentation to file federal unemployment insurance. Colorado has started a program, and we've been working on one in Washington State as well, with the hope being that other states can apply these solutions.
Before we proceed with this conversation, so let me take you back. Every time when you keep talking about Washington State,
Mm-hmm.
can you just share with our viewers and our listeners where is exactly the Washington State is located here in the United States? Welcome, Mr. Chege.
Yeah. For people who aren't as familiar, so Washington State is in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast. And so, like other states like California or Oregon, even Alaska a little bit, those are states where I think culturally they're more laid back. They're also getting more racially diverse. So in Washington, 1 out of every 3 people are people of color. And, people will hear about all sorts of crazy things happening in the United States, and uh, part of um, that is just how nationalized everything has gotten. And so the other trend has been organizations like us who are working at the state level and trying to get those solutions modeled. Whereas in other countries, in Kenya, if you really want to do something big, if you want to change a law in a big way, Parliament is the place you go for that. In the United States, because we don't have a parliament or multi-party democracy, they the two parties will get stuck and just not do anything. And so I think lots of states have been trying to make progress on their own and sort of hoping that the federal government will catch up later.
For those of you listening to American Sway News and Sway Within Online TV, we're here interviewing Mr. Moses Kamau Chege. Where are you from originally?
So my family immigrated from Kenya in 2001 and lived here in South Carolina and then in different states in St. Louis, Missouri, and the Midwest, in the other Carolina, up north in Charlotte, and then to Seattle. Yeah.
And what exactly motivated you to move to Seattle, Washington State? Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, when you're a kid, you just follow your parents wherever they're going. But I think for them, they just saw better job opportunities in some of those states, and maybe then they had friends there, and yeah.
Okay, so here you are now. You are executive director for Washington Community Alliance. Can you just elaborate just a little bit? And then I know you have mentioned to some extent in the beginning of this conversation. So where do you see yourself running these organizations as a CEO? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And you're very young in terms of age, but in terms of the leadership, I can see you can blossom. Maybe in another 5 years, you'll be maybe in Washington D.C. and making some policies and laws for the United States. I don't want to go get myself ahead of you.
Yeah.
Just share with us, where do you see yourself, and what is this Washington Community Alliance?
Yeah, I probably see myself still working on the same issues and maybe at a different organization or at a labor union. To me, there's sort of two big issues to work on for a long time. One of them is the economy, the amount of wealth and income inequality that we have, because the more that a handful of people at the top are able to accumulate the resources that everyone else is creating, the worse things are for most people. And our economy is just how we decide to it's just a question of who is going to get what and why. And right now it's people at the top are going to get a lot of money because they inherited it or they have it in investments that keep growing. And I think there's a different way. There's a different way to construct the economy that's more fair and balanced. And then democracy, which is how we make decisions at a very large scale, millions of people deciding what or we want our collective future to be. And right now, there aren't a lot of ways for people to communicate what they want. We have sort of single choice voting. So you can't say, if you didn't have this representative, you'd rather have that one. And if that one, doesn't make it, you'd rather have this one. And proportional representation, if there's a community that is 30% of the vote, they should have 30% of the representation in a legislature or something like that. And that's really important, especially in America. For people who are outside of the United States, some of them might not know this, but we didn't have voting rights protected until the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Mhm.
So the whole country is very young in
Mhm.
terms of being a multiracial democracy. And there are lots of problems that haven't been addressed about that. So I'd still be working on the same issues.
Okay. Let me fast forward our conversations now with respect to the pictures that sits behind you. And that's the AKA Africa or Nagi Tumaini Njuguna. Can you share with our viewers and our listeners or people who are watching us and listening to us now, who is Nagi, AKA
Yeah.
Africa?
For me, I met Nagi in this house when I arrived. And I was 6 years old.
Mhm.
So um, there was just a period of years where it was really
Mhm.
like a mentor figure, like a brother, because he also had a younger brother,
Mhm.
Braca. And so the three of us spent a lot of time. And that's like a very
Mhm.
impactful period because you're young and you're trying to figure out how to do things, and especially in a new place, and how to make friends.
Mhm.
And that was a lot of what Nagi represented and did so well,
Mhm.
was bring people together,
Mhm.
you know, make them laugh. He was really important, those things. And I think they translated a lot in the way that he showed up as a creative, and in the plays that he did locally, or movies that he appeared in, um, you know, nationally and um, uh, internationally on different streaming sites. So he was a very special person, and I came down here to be with the family and to celebrate that life.
Absolutely. So let me move these conversations now in East Africa, not
Hmm.
particularly in Kenya. I know you're from Kenya.
Hmm.
When we talk about East Africa, we talks about Tanzania, Uganda,
Hmm.
Rwanda, Burundi, and then I think DRC also now is in East African
Hmm.
community, and also South Sudan,
Yeah.
and all of these countries in East Africa, but Tanzanian,
Hmm.
they do have a dual citizenship
Hmm.
as diaspora.
Yeah.
Talks a little bit about dual citizenship, the benefits of the dual citizenship, uh, and maybe you can um, spike some lights and knowledge to the people, the decisions makers
Hmm.
in Tanzania, because your fight here in America,
Hmm.
you trying to advocate and push
Hmm.
issues that people they're facing. And Tanzanians now in the diaspora, they're fighting for the dual citizenship.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mr. Chege.
Yeah. Um, just speaking as an observer, I think it's dual citizenship is a great thing individually. If you are able to get dual citizenship, that's something you should definitely take advantage of, especially if you want to fully participate in the uh, growth and future of both countries. And maybe from your work, or where you spend your time, or where you spend your money, you want to keep contributing to those two countries, you should definitely get dual citizenship. And I think at the uh, level of, from the state's perspective, these different countries, uh, some of them get nervous about, if there's dual citizenship, is their brain drained? Do people who would be working full time, spending all their time in Tanzania, now sort of spending less time there and more time in the United States or whatever other country that would offer people dual citizenship? And maybe that's real, but the other side of it is the reality that there are a lot of Tanzanian Americans. There's a lot of Tanzanians here, and they probably want to be able to have a say
Mhm.
in the place that they live.
Mhm.
Going back to the democracy issues,
Mhm.
um, and be able to get the full benefits of participating, contributing to these two places without needing to choose one or the other. So I think that movement's really encouraging, and certainly for anyone who's watching and thinking about dual citizenship and can do that, that's something you should definitely do.
Thank you very much for taking your time, but I'm not going to let you go without uh, telling us what is your last word now with respect to all of this, what we have discussed
Hmm.
so far. Take us home.
Yeah, I think something that I've just learned is you could do a lot more than you think if you're organizing in your community and you're bringing a lot of people together around a shared agenda.
Mhm.
And what's even more powerful, and I think one of the reasons that makes the organization I work for special is,
Mhm.
uh, then those organizations are bringing their communities together across different lines and working on projects together and finding out that the community that lives on the other side of town,
Mhm.
they also want more transit or more investments or feel like these things are wrong,
Mhm.
and they want to come together to be able to show popular support for those things. And they've been able to see one campaign after another be successful and changing one thing after another. And that is what creates the sort of the flywheel and makes the next campaign easier, is when you can go back to these different, when one person from one of those communities can show how beneficial it was to work with a different organization and deliver for their communities. And so that's really encouraging, and other people can get involved and organize and make their voices heard. That's what makes everything else better.
Thank you, Mr. Kamau Chege, and welcome to a show again next time. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you. Probably, maybe we're in
Yeah.
Washington